Militant group Hezbollah has vowed to retaliate against Israel, accusing it of detonating pagers across Lebanon that killed 9 people and wounded around 3,000 others.
And of course, the ones who were wounded, those include Iran's envoy to Beirut. Now, Lebanese Information Minister Ziad Makari called it an Israeli aggression and condemned the detonation of the pagers. Now, pagers are essentially handheld devices that were mostly used over 2 decades ago, but Hezbollah has still been using them, and they use them in Lebanon to send messages to each other. That's how they communicate. Hezbollah said that Israel will receive its fair punishment for these blasts.
The Israeli military, which has been engaged in cross-border fighting with the Iran-backed Hezbollah since the start of the Gaza war in October, declined to respond to the questions about the detonations. As per reports, a senior Lebanese security claimed that Israel's Mossad spy agency planted a small amount of explosives inside 5,000 Taiwan-made pagers ordered by the Lebanese group months ago.
The Tuesday afternoon blasts hit Hezbollah strongholds across Lebanon and dealt a heavy blow to the militant group. One video even showed a person paying at a grocery store when a small handheld device placed next to the cashier, it exploded.
The numbers that arrived at the emergency rooms are very big. It is obvious that it was in different areas because we saw injured people arriving at hospitals in the Dahieh and the Beirut areas, as well as injuries in the south, especially in Tyre and the Bekaa areas.
The casualties included Hezbollah fighters, the sons of top officials from the armed group. One of those killed is the son of a Hezbollah member of the Lebanese parliament, Ali Amar. The 10-year-old daughter of a Hezbollah member was killed in Bekaa Valley when his pager exploded.
Now, according to reports, Iran's ambassador to Lebanon, Murtaba Amani, also suffered an injury in the pager blast and was under observation in the hospital. The pagers began to detonate around 3:45 p.m. local time, and explosions continued for about an hour. It was not immediately clear how the devices were detonated.
Meanwhile, the United States has said it was not aware and in advance and has no involvement in the mass explosions of pagers used by Lebanon's Hezbollah.
Well, I can tell you that the U.S. was not involved in it. The U.S. was not aware of this incident in advance, and at this point we're gathering information.
U.S. State Department spokesperson declined to comment on Hezbollah's claims that the blasts were carried out by Israel, though he urged Iran not to take advantage of any incident to raise instability in the West Asian region.
We would urge Iran not to take advantage of any incident, any instability, to try to add further instability and to further increase tensions in the region. That has been our message to Iran since October 7th.
All right, and for more on this, we're now being joined by Professor James A. Russell. He is Associate Professor in the Department of National Security Affairs at NPS. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, sir, given the recent developments, will the IEDs be more widely used going forward in the ongoing hostilities?
I'm sorry, will what be more widely used?
So the improvised explosive devices that were in the pagers.
Yes. Right. Well, this is a form of warfare that the world has regrettably seen over the last, couple of decades. Really gets it's another version of course, what the United States saw when it entered Iraq and Afghanistan, and of course, regrettably, it became the weapon of choice used against U.S. forces. Obviously, applied against vehicles. This is somewhat different, of course, but yes, these kinds of weapons have been around for a long time, and they were just deployed in a different kind of way by the apparently by the Israelis, according to reports in the New York Times. It was the Israelis who implanted these explosives in pagers ordered by Hezbollah from Taiwan.
Professor, pagers were essentially used over 20 years ago. It was in the late 90s, early 2000s even. That's essentially when people were most actively using pagers. In today's day and age, to track a shipment of pagers coming into any kind of to any country, and essentially they do come from Taiwan still, it's very easy to track that, okay, these number of pagers are being sent out. And of course, Lebanon being Israel's immediate neighbor, allegedly, Lebanon, they've been claiming that Israel is behind these blasts, but it would not be difficult to track where they are being used. There are many theories regarding how these detonations took place simultaneously. Anything that comes to your mind on how it actually took place?
Well, Israel is in the forefront of cyber warfare kinds of technologies and applications. And of course, this is simply another version of what, again, the United States encounters in Iraq and Afghanistan, in which the insurgents over the course of the wars sort of evolved into increasingly sophisticated ways of detonating the improvised explosive devices. Until it migrated from pressure plates to various things until it was just remote detonation. So this is an example of that, in which the Israelis got inside, apparently, I don't have any direct knowledge of this, but apparently they got into the sort of electronics of how the pagers communicate and hacked into it and were able to program the detonations using this means. So, it's just, again, another example of the weapons that have evolved in this era. And of course, not so interestingly for Hezbollah, of course, is that they were forced into using these pagers, of course, because cell phones,
yes,
they're an open book, basically, for powers that are observing / listening to. In the American wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, cell phones were the number one, sort of device that Americans were able to track for the purposes of conducting targeted assassinations, roundups of insurgent networks.
Yes,
and of course,
it's interesting that they were forced
yes.
to not use cell phones, and then they resorted to pagers. And this seems to be in the making, or this seems to have been the plan since many months. Ever since they would have placed the order, it would have come into their hands, it would have been in regular use, and then finally, yesterday became the day when they finally detonated.
Absolutely. And Professor, I also want to understand, the United States has said that it was not aware in advance of it and had no involvement in these mass pager explosions. Now, given how important American support has been for Israel, it's essentially a lifeline. What do you make of the United States' response to this?
Well, I think you have to, this is yet another example, of Israel ignoring American interests and American suggestions. You have to remember that the American envoy was in Israel yesterday, asking the Israelis, of course, or requesting the Israelis do what? Not escalate in Lebanon. So the day after the envoy leaves, what do the Israelis do? They escalate in Lebanon. And so this is, again, just another example of Israel off on its own. It's telling the United States about what it's doing after the fact, presenting us as its main benefactor, with a fait accompli, in effect, all seeking to push the region towards a wider regional war that we in the United States would or could become involved in. This is a long-running objective of the Likud and of Bibi Netanyahu. So this is just another dangerous escalation by the Israelis that do any of us, or do any of your viewers watching this, think that this attack is going to somehow short circuit or reduce tensions? Of course not. It's designed to continue heighten tensions. And the concluding thought that I would offer to this from the Israelis is they should be careful what they wish for. Here they are attacking civilians and other people in other countries, government officials in other countries. Can any of us think about what the Israeli reaction would be if a bunch of Israelis were suddenly killed by mysterious explosions in their cell phones. The Israelis would go crazy, right? So in other words, they should be careful about all this stuff. You know, they think they're, you know, sort of superior, and that, you know, if this kind of thing can't happen to them, well, you know, maybe they're underestimating their adversaries. There are lots of countries out there that have always underestimated their adversaries, including the United States. You know,
you get your point.
They should be careful with what they wish for.
Underestimating, and of course, this definitely does not reduce tensions in any measure. You know, and the US has been carrying out rounds and after rounds of diplomatic talks to get the two sides to arrive at some kind of a ceasefire. Of course, that doesn't seem to be anywhere close after the recent developments again. Thank you so much for joining in, sir. That was Professor James A. Russell. Always a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.